Hold one of these in your hand, feel the weight of it. The cool, smooth surface. The satisfying ring when you drop it on a table. There's something undeniably different about a real silver coin. Something that a modern quarter just doesn't have. For nearly 2 centuries, the United States put real silver, pure, precious silver, into the coins that ordinary Americans used every single day. Dimes, quarters, half dollars, silver dollars. These weren't collector pieces or special editions. They were pocket change. Money you'd hand to a cashier, toss in a jar, or leave as a tip. And then, almost overnight, it stopped. In 1965, the United States government quietly made one of the most consequential decisions in the history of American money. They took the silver out of everyday coins and never put it back. Why did they do it? What forces drove one of the world's most powerful nations to abandon a tradition that stretched back thousands of years? And what was lost when they made that choice? I'm Coin Legacy, and today we're going on a deep dive into the full story, the economics, the politics, the silver shortage, and the moment America's coins stopped being made of real money. To understand why America eventually abandoned silver coins, you first need to understand why silver became money in the first place, because this story goes back a very, very long time. For over 2,500 years, silver was the backbone of global commerce. The ancient Greeks minted the silver tetradrachm. The Romans relied on the denarius, a small silver coin that paid their soldiers and fueled one of history's greatest empires. In medieval Europe, the silver penny was the standard unit of exchange across dozens of kingdoms. And in colonial America, Spanish silver pieces of 8, minted in Mexico and South America, were so universally trusted that they circulated legally in the United States until 1857. Why silver? Because it had everything you want in money. It was rare enough to be valuable, but not so rare that you couldn't actually use it. It didn't rust or rot. You couldn't easily fake it. You could divide it, melt it, weigh it. Every culture, on every continent, independently discovered that silver worked as money, and that tells you something profound about the metal itself. Silver was money. Not a symbol of money. Not a promise of money. Silver was money in the most direct, tangible sense of the word. When you handed someone a silver coin, you were giving them a piece of actual wealth, a piece of a rare, useful, universally desired metal. No government needed to tell you it was valuable. The market told you that. This idea, that coins should contain real metal of real worth, is called commodity money. And for most of human history, it was simply how the world worked. People trusted coins because the coins themselves were worth something. That trust was baked into the metal. When the United States was founded, there was no debate about what money should be made of. The Coinage Act of 1792, one of the very first major pieces of legislation passed by the new Congress, established the U.S. dollar and defined it in terms of silver. $1 was equal to 371¼ grains of pure silver. That was it. That was the dollar. Not a piece of paper. Not a promise. A specific, measurable amount of a real metal. From that moment, American silver coinage began in earnest. The U.S. Mint in Philadelphia, the first federal building erected under the new Constitution, started striking silver coins in 1792. And over the next 170 years, American silver coins became some of the most beautiful, most admired, and most enduring pieces of currency the world had ever seen. Think about the coins that came out of this tradition. The flowing hair dollar of 1794. The seated Liberty coins that defined the mid-1800s. And then the golden age of American coin design at the turn of the 20th century, when artists like Adolph Weinman gave us the walking Liberty half-dollar, widely considered one of the most beautiful coins ever minted. The Mercury dime. The peace dollar. These weren't just currency, they were art. They were a nation's values, cast in silver. And right through the first half of the 20th century, Americans carried this silver in their pockets every single day. Your grandfather's dime was 90% silver. The quarter he'd get back from a candy store, 90% silver. The $50 he might save for something special, 90% silver. This wasn't unusual. This was just money. That's what money was. Metal with real, intrinsic value. But deep underneath this comfortable tradition, pressures were building. Pressures that would, within a few decades, make silver coinage impossible to sustain. The first hints that silver coinage might not survive forever came during World War II. When America entered the war in 1941, the government suddenly needed silver, not just for coins, but for industrial uses. Electrical contacts. Ammunition. Military equipment. The war machine had an enormous appetite for the metal. So in 1942, the U.S. Mint did something it had never done before. It temporarily changed the composition of the 5-cent nickel, adding silver to it, while simultaneously redirecting as much copper and nickel as possible toward the war effort. The Silver War nickel was born, 35% silver, and you could spot them by the large mint mark placed above Monticello on the reverse. For collectors today, these are fascinating pieces of American wartime history. After the war ended and silver returned to normal usage in coins, most Americans probably thought things would just go back to the way they'd always been. And for about 15 years, they more or less did. But here's what was actually happening beneath the surface. The post-war boom changed America in ways that would have dramatic consequences for silver coinage. The population was growing, fast. The baby boom was underway. Suburbs were expanding. Factories were humming. Vending machines, parking meters, pay phones, laundromats, a new consumer economy was emerging that ran on coins. Billions and billions of coins. The U.S. Mint was already struggling to keep up with demand in the 1950s. But the real crisis was still coming, and it was going to be driven by something economists call Gresham's law. In the early 1960s, something started going wrong with America's coin supply. Not just a little wrong, catastrophically wrong. Coins were disappearing from circulation. Banks were running out of them. Businesses couldn't make change. The U.S. Mint was striking hundreds of millions of coins a year, and they were vanishing almost as fast as they were made. What was happening? The answer goes back to a principle first described by a 16th-century English financier named Sir Thomas Gresham, who advised Queen Elizabeth I. His observation, now known as Gresham's law, is elegantly simple: bad money drives out good. What does that mean in practice? When two types of currency are in circulation and one has more intrinsic value than the other, people will spend the less valuable one and hoard the more valuable one. It's completely rational human behavior. If you're given a choice between spending a coin worth its face value and one worth more than its face value as a commodity, which do you spend? In the early 1960s, the price of silver on the open market started rising dramatically. Thanks to growing industrial demand, photography, electronics, manufacturing, silver was becoming more valuable as a raw material. And at a certain point, the silver in a U.S. dime, quarter, or $50 was actually worth more than 10 cents, 25 cents, or 50 cents. The coin's metal content was worth more than its face value. When that happens, the rational thing to do is hoard the coins and melt them for their silver content. And that is exactly what people started doing, sometimes by individual savers, sometimes by companies doing it at industrial scale. Gresham's law was eating America's coin supply alive. By 1963 and 1964, the situation was becoming a genuine national emergency. There literally weren't enough coins to go around. The U.S. Mint was working around the clock, striking coins with old-date dies from 1964 well into 1965, but it wasn't enough. The coin shortage was causing real problems for ordinary commerce. Businesses posted signs asking customers for exact change. Banks rationed coins to customers. Vending machine operators were in crisis. Something had to be done. And President Lyndon Johnson's administration was about to take action that would permanently change the nature of American money. On July 23, 1965, President Lyndon Johnson signed the Coinage Act of 1965 into law. And with that signature, silver was gone from the dime and the quarter, forever. The new coins looked almost the same. They had the same designs. They were the same size. But they were fundamentally different on the inside. The new dimes and quarters were made of what's called clad metal, a copper core bonded between two layers of cupronickel, an alloy of copper and nickel. No silver. None at all. You can actually tell the difference by looking at the edge of a coin. A pre-1965 silver dime or quarter has a solid silver edge, uniform in color, all the way through. A post-1965 clad coin has a visible copper stripe running around its edge. That little orange line is the tell. That's how coin collectors spot the old silver coins from the new clad ones instantly. The $half got a softer treatment, at least initially. Rather than going fully clad, the 1965 $half was reduced to 40% silver, still a significant cut from the original 90%, but not yet eliminated entirely. The Kennedy $half, first issued in 1964 as a tribute to the recently assassinated president, was a tremendously popular coin, and the government perhaps felt that stripping it completely of silver right away would be too jarring. At the signing ceremony, President Johnson gave a speech that is remarkable for how directly it addressed the change being made, and how hard it tried to reassure an American public that might be worried about what it meant. He said the new coins were, quote, just as good as the silver coins they replace. He emphasized that the government stood behind the value of these coins. And he actually dismissed concerns about the change with a line that sounds almost like nervous humor in retrospect. He said that he didn't anticipate any difficulties from speculators, because anyone who tried to hoard the coins would, quote, find they have a bargain, in terms of copper and nickel. The government was trying very hard to tell people, don't worry. Nothing has really changed. These new coins are still good money. But had something changed? Many Americans, especially in the coin collecting community, thought that something profound had indeed been lost. The public reaction to the Coinage Act of 1965 was complicated. On one hand, most ordinary Americans just went along with it. Coins were coins. You used them to buy things. As long as stores and vending machines accepted the new clad coins, and they did, life went on. But underneath that surface acceptance, there was real unease. The coin collecting community was alarmed. Many numismatists, people who study and collect coins, saw the transition away from silver as a sign of something deeper, a weakening of the connection between money and real value. There was a reason people trusted silver coins, they argued. You could trust them because the silver itself had value independent of any government's promise. Take away the silver, and all you have is a government's word. In Congress, the debate had been fierce. Several legislators argued that removing silver from coins was essentially a form of debasement, the same thing Roman emperors did when they secretly reduced the silver content of their coins to stretch the money supply, a practice that contributed to centuries of economic instability. The parallel was uncomfortable. Senator Everett Dirksen of Illinois was among the most colorful opponents of the change. He reportedly held up a silver dime and said that he intended to keep it as a reminder of what real money used to be like. But the administration's argument won the day. The coin shortage was real. The silver price was real. The economic pressures were undeniable. From a purely practical standpoint, you simply could not continue making coins from silver when silver was worth more than the face value of the coins. The math didn't work. The choice wasn't really between silver coins and clad coins, it was between clad coins and no coins at all. And so the Coinage Act passed. And the transition began. After 1965, silver's retreat from American coinage was gradual but inevitable. The $half, as we mentioned, hung on at 40% silver from 1965 through 1970. But in 1971, even that ended. The new Eisenhower dollar, a large coin issued to honor the recently deceased president, was made entirely of clad metal for circulation strikes. The half-dollar went fully clad. Silver was now completely absent from any coin meant for everyday use. The last silver coins produced for collectors, and this is significant for numismatists, were the 40% silver-proof and uncirculated versions of the Eisenhower dollar, produced at the San Francisco Mint from 1971 through 1976. After that, even proof coins for collectors went clad. It's worth pausing to appreciate what the 1964 coins represent. The 1964 Kennedy half-dollar, the 1964 Washington quarter, the 1964 Roosevelt dime, these were the last of their kind. The last dimes and quarters minted in 90% silver for circulation. When those coins left the mint in 1964, they were the end of a tradition stretching back to the very founding of the Republic. Nobody who received one as change in a store necessarily knew they were holding a piece of American monetary history. But they were. Today, of course, collectors know exactly what those coins are. And they seek them out accordingly. So what is the legacy of this change? What does it mean that America stopped making silver coins? On the purely practical level, the government's decision worked. The coin shortage ended. The clad coins held their face value. Commerce continued. Vending machines adapted. Nobody's world fell apart because their dimes no longer had silver in them. But something subtler shifted. The connection between money and real, tangible value was severed. Before 1965, your coins were worth something even if the government collapsed. Even if the economy went into crisis. Even if no one accepted the dollar anymore. Because the metal itself had value that existed independently of any government's promise. After 1965, that was no longer true. Your coins were worth something because the government said so, and because everyone agreed to act as if they were. That's a very different kind of money, and a lot of people were, at some level, aware of the difference even if they couldn't articulate it precisely. For the coin collecting community, for people like you watching this channel, the transition of 1965 actually created one of the most enduring themes in American numismatics. The hunt for pre-1965 silver coins. The silver dime roll. The 90% silver bag. The junk silver market, which lets ordinary people accumulate real silver at close to melt value, embedded in the most familiar coin designs in American history. And the U.S. Mint, perhaps acknowledging what had been lost, eventually returned silver to a different kind of coin. In 1986, the American Silver Eagle was introduced, 1 troy ounce of 99.9% fine silver, issued as a bullion coin and collector piece. It's not pocket change. It's not meant to be. But it is the government acknowledging, in its own way, that silver still matters. That there is still a place for real metal in American monetary tradition, even if that place is now in a collector's box rather than a cash register drawer. The silver coins are still out there. In coffee cans in attics. In inherited collections. In coin shop display cases. Every pre-1965 dime, quarter, and half-dollar that survived is a small piece of a world where money meant something you could hold in your hand and know had real value regardless of what any government said or did. The story of why America stopped making silver coins is ultimately a story about trade-offs. About what we gain when money becomes purely symbolic, flexibility, scalability, ease of management. And about what we lose, the ancient, intuitive connection between money and something real. Whether that trade-off was worth it is a debate that economists, historians, and coin collectors will probably never fully resolve. But understanding that story, knowing where your coins came from, what they were, and why they changed, that's part of what makes numismatics more than just a hobby. It's a window into the deepest questions about value, trust, and what money actually is. If you found this documentary useful, please hit like and subscribe to Coin Legacy for more deep dive history and numismatics content. Drop a comment below. I want to know, Do you actively collect pre-1965 silver coins? And do you think America should ever return to silver coinage? Let me know. Until next time, keep searching those rolls.